I feel like on a weekly basis, you all ask for Dynasty content. That's what I'm giving you here today. On the back end, with all of my peers, my colleagues over at Underdog, we are starting from scratch a full PPR, Superflex, tight end premium league. I'll talk you through all of the details of that at the start, but most importantly, I'm going to walk you through, 25 plus picks that I will be making in this startup draft from the 109 spot, plus the strategy at the front to see if I actually succeeded in that once we are complete. Let's get into those details. This is what the starting lineups are going to look like. 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 2 flex spots, and then 1 super flex spot with 15 bench after that. So let's look at like a top-down view of how I believe I'm going to draft this team. I was really hoping for Justin Jefferson here at the 109 spot because to me, after the quarterbacks that you get from Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jane Daniels, Jalen Hurts, and Joe Burrow, it's almost this tier of quarterbacks that I don't know if I can select one at the very top of. Patrick Mahomes, Caleb Williams, Justin Herbert, Bo Nix, Drake May. I mean, this list might all the way go down to Trevor Lawrence for me. So with 7 selections after this first one, I believe I can get one of those 7 quarterbacks at the 2-4 spot. The other interesting wrinkle for this league is we also have 3rd round reversal. So I will have the 1-9, the 2-4, and the 3-4. How I love to attack dynasty drafts is load up on wide receivers. And I mean load up on wide receivers. I am a running back redraft bro. You see it all the time on this channel. We have the running back revolution, and that certainly worked in the year 2024. I think it's going to once again in the year 2025. But Dynasty is simply put a different game, and the longevity of the wide receivers, especially alphas, last so much longer. They are so incredibly dependable. Plus, once again, this is full point PPR. I will remind you. So I wanted to take Justin Jefferson here, but I still think we are at like a really apex point of this wide receiver group. I'm probably going to select CeeDee Lamb or Puka Nacua, most likely CeeDee Lamb. Then at that 2-4 spot, get one of those quarterbacks. And then hopefully when we get to 3-4, there's someone like Nico Collins still available for me. So I can go wide receiver, quarterback, wide receiver, and then get that second super flex quarterback or even third for my roster a bit later on. It's okay if they're, true pocket guys, pocket statues, or of the older variety. I'd be okay with, the Jared Goff, the Dak Prescotts. We'll see if Michael Penix is there. Heck, even if Justin Fields as a 1-year potential starter is there for me in my super flex, that's totally fine because I can go into these future drafts, these future rookie drafts, knowing that quarterback is so important. But how my most successful dynasty teams have been so far, they have loaded up with wide receivers. And I'm not going to say I piecemeal the running back position, but I get one almost figurehead and then really try to get it right in terms of split backfields or veterans at that spot or ones that are headed into free agent deals that have shown something and might be added or signed with another team to be their starting running backs. And I really do want to win the wide receiver position, also win the flex with wide receiver. And then the only thing that I am concerned about is that running back 2 on my roster. If that is the only thing exiting this draft that I'm concerned about, then this is going to be a massive victory. So why don't we make this selection while we're here on the clock? Again, strat is top wide receiver here at the 1-9. Certainly would have preferred one of those top 4 selections. Didn't get it. Then the 2-4, we take a quarterback, and then the 3-4, another wide receiver. So I'm going to, once again, select CeeDee Lamb here at the 1-9 spot. I want to make sure I actually want to do that. Oh, do I want to do that? I do. It's obviously tough to pass up on, the Bijan Robinsons, the Jahmyr Gibbs, the Ashton Genties at the top. Again, they can have an awesome 2025, 2026, 2027. But I'm looking at CeeDee Lamb, 26 years of age, the same exact age group as Justin Jefferson at this moment, and just think I'm going to have 4, 5+ years of peak performance attached to a quarterback that we've seen him produce at a ridiculous level and we'll see on the turn if one of those running backs are still there or if I'm going to take a quarterback. Here we are, round 2, and I lied to all of you. I know I said my plan was to attack the quarterback position in the second round, but I've changed my mind. This is why. It's the third round reversal, okay? And after those top 5 quarterbacks that are off the board, to me, it just gets super flat from about quarterback 6 to quarterback 15. That's anywhere from Patrick Mahomes to Trevor Lawrence. I would be satisfied with any of those to be my primary quarterback at the end of this build. And again, adding a second one along the way. Now you have to compare that to wide receivers that are still left on the board. So again, just to update everyone, after I selected CeeDee Lamb at the 109, after that it went Malik Neighbors, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Brian Thomas, Ashton Genty, and then Puka Nacua. So now no running backs are worth this selection, right? As much as I love Devon Achane as a player and in the situation for 2025, he is not the type that I want to take in the second round here just for longevity purposes. Saquon, Bucky Irving, those are the other running backs, Omari and Hampton. Wide receivers, though, definitely possibilities. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Nico Collins are the top 2 on my mind. We'll come back to them in a moment. But the reason why I'm willing to take a risk of waiting to, again, the 304 to take my first quarterback is the drop off, again, isn't significant from the quarterback, I think 6 to 15, but it is right now from the wide receiver at the top of this build down to, if we go 10 wide receiver spots, that's Rome Odunze, Devontae Smith, Xavier Worthy. These are quality players. Don't get me wrong. I might target them a bit later on, but not as my second pass catcher in this build. The other option is Trey McBride. He and Brock Bowers are the clear top 2 tight ends in a build like this, in my opinion. But my brain is going to decide between Amon-Ra St. Brown and Nico Collins. And how I also like to think about it is if we're just drafting for 2025 fantasy football, both of these guys are being selected in the first round over an Underdog at this moment. That makes me feel pretty good that I'm getting 2 top 12 picks to build my Dynasty roster off of. I posted a quick poll on Twitter because I just want to gauge where people are right now. ARSB, Nico Collins, about 6 months apart at this moment. I think Nico Collins has an outside chance of, being the wide receiver 1 in points per game. People are kind of underrating, I believe, Nick Caley coming into this program and turning him into a bit of a Julio Jones-esque player. But man, Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't miss games, even if he's coming off a knee surgery we know nothing about this offseason. And he's just been doing it over and over and over again. And yes, I know, different play caller, different offensive coordinator this year. Still think that this Lions team is going to be one of the best in this league. But put the poll out on Twitter. Who do you prefer in Dynasty PPR startups? Just around 600 votes, so not a ton. But Nico Collins is actually ahead at 54.3% compared to Amon-Ra St. Brown's 45.7%. I understand it. I'm not going to agree with it here. So my start in this draft is going to be CeeDee Lamb and then Amon-Ra St. Brown. It is 10:35 p.m. on a Thursday. Let's talk round 3 because my league mates are tempting me and I might have lied to you again. First, 2 very cool things that have happened here. One, check out the 5th spot, Ian, tight end premium, back-to-back tight ends, Brock Bowers, Trey McBride. Just a cool build that I can't wait for you and for me to see how it unfolds. And then the second thing, I tried to trade up 2 spots into the 3-2 pick to go and get Drake May. Didn't work. Didn't even get a counteroffer, unfortunately. And so here we are. I told you in the first 3 rounds, I was for sure going to have a build of 2 wide receivers and 1 quarterback. But man, I'm looking at this quarterback list and it seems once again so flat to me. CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Brock Purdy, Cam Ward, JJ McCarthy, all the way down to Michael Penix and Dak Prescott. There are about 9 names there that I would feel okay with and almost on an even playing field as my quarterback 1 at this point, since I missed out on the young guys in Herbert and specifically May and Trevor Lawrence. So I think I'm going to punt quarterback again. Look, I did the counting. You can do the math with me right now. There are at most, I believe, 8 quarterbacks that can be selected before me next. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Everyone else has 2 quarterbacks at most. And I don't think all 8 of those are going to be selected. Not every player would have made me pivot off of my plan, but Devon Achane's name is just standing out. I can't get over it. I mean, this is someone who I think is going to be a top 12 player this season. I would spend a top 12 draft pick on him in 2025 fantasy football drafts. Yet 16 non-quarterbacks have already been selected off the board. 16. He would be the 17th. Someone who is a dynamic pass catcher out of the backfield if things don't go according to plan, just like it did last year for the Miami Dolphins, right? His 34 receptions when lined up from the slot or out wide. The next closest at the running back position was at 15. We know that at the very least, they can pull the lever, get the football out easily to Devon Achane. But at the same time, if the two new guards and improved offensive line play actually opens up rushing, where this Dolphins offense had 2 top 4 scorers at the position, then it brings us back to 2023. NFL record 7.8 yards per carry. Just explosive, dynamic. Was running back 4 in points per game, I think on just 13.4 touches per contest. To me, it makes sense. He has done both, right? When the blocking is good, when he gets to the alleys on the outside or up the middle, bang, we have a potential top 4 scoring season. Or if not, this type of scoring is going to aid him much more than other running backs. I know, I said it. I wasn't going to take a running back in the top 3 rounds, but I think there's a drop off after him. He has a chance of finishing as the overall running back 1 this season, in my opinion, and I'm just going to punt quarterback once again. I mean, I'm going to take him at the 4-9. Don't worry about it. I have one in mind that I hope gets there. I highly doubt 8 go before me, and if they do, I deserve it, but I would regret it if I didn't have a start of CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown in full point PPR to go along with Devon Achane. Let's talk round 4 and round 5, because I made a deal and packaged these two together. This was the time, as I told you, I was finally going to target the quarterback position. After Kyler Murray, Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield went off the board, along with CJ Stroud after my selection. There was actually one name that I thought stood out in that entire grouping, and he doesn't necessarily give you as much rushing upside as we always search for at the position that gives you the floor on a weekly basis. But he's in an offense that we absolutely love and have the easiest schedule in the NFL in 2025. And that is the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, last season could not have been any worse for this team. Total of 57 plays with Purdy, CMC, Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle all in the field together. Trent Williams missed 7 games last year. They were still 14th in points scored last season despite all of that. And Brock Purdy threw 4.7 touchdowns below expectation. It's time for a massive bounce back just overall when we're speaking of the 49ers offense. And again, it's not like they finished 24th in scoring. They were 14th. And heck, maybe it's 4th this upcoming year. And with the circumstances and the environment that he played in last season, he still was the quarterback 9 in points per game at 18.6. And to me, I understand some of those wide receivers are no longer on the team and not the peaks that we saw them. I still really like Ricky Pearsall. I still really like Juwan Jennings, but CMC returning should make life so much easier for Brock Purdy this year and beyond, because it gives them more single high looks. Only 49% of Brock Purdy's dropbacks this past season came with the middle of the field closed, meaning that single high stuff, allowing these wide receivers to attack down the field vertically. Previous years, that was at 60% and 60% according to Rich Rebar. So again, CMC back, all these other pieces hopefully healthy, gives a platform to attack the best, easiest schedule of any offense in this league, for one that we know has been top 5, top 6, top 7 in scoring in previous years. So that's my lead quarterback here. Along, you also talk about age. Brock Purdy, 25 years of age at drafting at this moment. Then I zoomed out and said to myself, okay, there are still players that I am picking between at this spot that I really want. Okay. And I don't know if I'm really willing to wait until the 5-4 and sit through 6 picks at the turn in order to miss up on one of these top 2 players that I was considering. Those 2 names were either Rome Odunze or Sam Laporta. I'm surprised when I look across the industry at Dynasty rankings, and Rome Odunze is like way, way, way down the list. I mean, this is a top 10 pick who showed really good signs in the NFL last season, especially in man coverage. He has a lot to learn in terms of zone. Hayden and I have talked about this takes a couple extra steps in zone coverage. He and Caleb simply weren't on the same page with that. But look, we have seen really two wide receivers blossom underneath Ben Johnson in Detroit, not just Amon-Ra St. Brown, but also Jameson Williams. And I could see, Rome Odunze leading that team in receiving this year, and DJ Moore might be on the tail end of his Chicago Bears career when we think about adding Colson Loveland, when we think about adding Luther Burden on top of this. So really tempted by Rome. But the direction I actually went, again, we're sticking with this Lions theme, is Sam Laporta. And it's because there's such a long way back to me that I feel like in a half tight end premium league, there's going to be a lot of nibbles at this spot. And we just saw in 2023, Sam Laporta be the tight end one. Granted, that was associated and attached to Ben Johnson. I still think his talent is more of a receiving option, but he definitely has an all-around appeal on top of it. And we're already getting at least a 2-round gap of where Brock Bowers and Trey McBride went earlier on. And he's just in a tier of his own when we factor in youth and age into all of this. So I moved back in a couple rounds later on in order to secure myself back-to-back picks in round 4 and made that second selection being Sam Laporta. Let's talk round 6 and round 7. More news, more trades. Before we get there, let's recap for the audio listeners what the team is at the moment. Starts off CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devon Achane, Brock Purdy, Sam Laporta. All right. That's our team through 5 rounds. But because of that move up for Sam Laporta, again, tight end premium, I didn't have a selection in round 5, and actually didn't have a selection because I was moving down from round 6 to round 7. It is a super flex. I'm keeping that in mind with all of these picks, especially as we get to the later stages of maybe rookies or unproven quarterbacks, combating that with quarterbacks of an older age and maybe on the tail end of their careers. I know because I have Brock Purdy, again, mid-20s, that I don't mind targeting someone that is going to be a top scorer for me, I feel, in 2025, 2026, 2027, and then we'll just see from then on. Again, we're playing the long game here at that quarterback spot too. Rookies, young players come into mind in rookie drafts in the future. But after I made the Sam Laporta selection, Cam Ward went off the board. J.J. McCarthy went off the board. Bryce Young, Michael Penix, and Justin Fields. And what gave me some concern is that Michael Penix already went to a team that had selected 2 quarterbacks previously. So I knew I had to move up, especially against Ambrose here, all right, who was going to be 1 selection ahead of me at the 7-3 and the 7-4 selections. And so I didn't want him to decide what quarterback was left on the board. I had targeted Dak Prescott as the veteran quarterback in comparison to Jared Goff or Tua Tagovailoa or Matthew Stafford or Geno Smith. I wanted Dak Prescott. Reason being, Dak was a top 8 scorer in points per game in 4 of his 5 seasons prior to 2024. We know that in 2024, torn hamstring, also didn't get offseason work with CeeDee Lamb as Lamb was waiting for a contract negotiation. Plus you add George Pickens onto this equation. You have a questionable backfield on top of that as well, even more so than last year. And I wouldn't be surprised if a young shoddy offense revolves around Dak Prescott slinging it across the yard. So our 2 quarterbacks, Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott, again, I think at times quarterbacks are actually severely undervalued in rookie drafts. All you have to look at is, Michael Penix and Bo Nix in previous years were kind of going at the 1-2 turn in a lot of leagues because they got heavily criticized during the draft process, and thus they became instant values in your rookie drafts. And again, instantly added value after those drafts were completed and after their rookie seasons. So again, let's get back on the wide receiver train. Now, the downside to making that move for Dak Prescott, I had to trade with our producer who's editing this right now in Weaves. And I did have back-to-back picks. I knew I wanted to target wide receiver with this second selection. So I had to give up that 7-3 spot. The name I wanted was Chris Olave. I think it could be a huge bounce back week for Chris Olave, bounce back season, I should say. I understand the quarterback situation, but we have seen what Kellen Moore does to his top wide receivers. That was the mid-20s wide receiver I was hoping for. Nope. We've snatched Olave from out underneath me. So this brings us to other wide receivers on the board at this moment. Jordan Addison, Jameson Williams,
even Matthew Golden if I wanted to take a chance on a rookie that we haven't seen a single time. But to be honest with you, it might be a surprise. I'm going to go with Jalen Waddle as my wide receiver 3 in this Dynasty build. Again, 26 years of age, give or take at this moment. This is someone who last year was almost totally forgotten about in that offense. Again, we have talked about, as I did with Achane, how they had to move away from just downfield wide receiver success in order to facilitate Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith out of the backfield. I think with the Jonnu Smith trade, again, we see this offense extremely condensed. And if you go back to 2023, Jalen Waddle was the wide receiver 22 in points per game. If we go back to 2022, Jalen Waddle is the wide receiver 11 in points per game. This might shock some of you, but he is still the 10th highest paid wide receiver in the league at this moment in terms of average value per year. So it can come back to bite me, but I am once again going to invest in this Dolphins offense, and I'm going to take Jalen Waddle as the 3rd wide receiver in this build.
Let's talk about round 9, because we don't have our round 8 pick any longer after moving up for Sam Laporta, after moving up for Dak Prescott. And unfortunately, that's where this came back to bite us just a little bit, because we're continuing on with our wide receiver theme. And at this point, I was really hoping for Ricky Pearsall at this 9-3 mark. He's young. He's on a good team. 2 factors that I think are really important for kind of building out the rest of the wide receiver spot. To me, there are still 2 excellent, and I mean excellent, veteran wide receivers that we just don't know how much time they have left, right? That's Davante Adams on the board. That is Mike Evans on the board. So I felt that this was kind of the last spot where I could almost mesh young, but also proven and on a good offense. I want to point that out, right? Because these quarterbacks that these players are attached to, that they have contracts, either rookie contracts or already second contracts, meaning that we're connected to that passing game for at least 2 or 3 years, which is what I am looking for when looking at dynasty teams. So Ricky Pearsall was the pick that I wanted. And then I was flabbergasted with what to do. I was really concerned. The reason we didn't get Ricky Pearsall, again, is because we made the move up for both Sam Laporta and Dak Prescott, which I think is very necessary when we're talking about tight end premium and when we're talking about Superflex. And so I kind of went unconventional here. I went with Khalil Shakir. I do not think Khalil Shakir is necessarily a ceiling play. I think we saw last season what happens when Josh Allen and, let's say, the Bills offense are top 2 or top 3 in scores at both quarterback and team overall. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to bring a pass catcher along with them. They spread it around. Based on his new contract, we know that Khalil Shakir is a Buffalo Bill for at least 2025 and 2026. That's when the guarantees go through. And he had 8 top 25 scoring weeks last season. I'm getting him here as around the wide receiver 40, wide receiver 41 in this startup draft. Okay, so that takes us to the next pick that we have here in round 9, because we had 2 of them. I was hoping Davante Adams would fall to this next spot at the 9-9. That did not happen. It went Adams, Trey Harris, Jerry Jeudy, Jackson Dart. At the time, Joe Mixon. Again, this was drafted before the news. And then I had to decide between Mike Evans, Cortland Sutton, Chris Godwin. I already had my quarterbacks. So, and James Conner. James Conner was another thought here, because I know, and as we talked about, my weakest spot is going to be my running back 2. We'll cover that later on. But James Conner was almost at the top of my list as veterans I think that can have exceptional 2025 seasons, and the team still relies on him, and he's still a very good player. But again, wide receiver theme here. We want to dominate all of those spots, plus the flex and full point PPR. And so with Davante Adams off the board, I went with Mike Evans. Look, Mike Evans will be 32 before this season. I was shocked when I looked at his over the cap contract that this is actually his final year. It's just void years beyond this year, even though he signed that new contract. I believe it was last offseason. Look, we're looking at the wide receiver 44 on the board. He was a top 10 scorer at the position, wide receiver 10 in points per game when we look at PPR scoring. So again, I am trying to dominate the flex positions and the wide receiver spot since we are starting 3. And then see how it goes, and Dr. Frankenstein, that running back 2 spot. So when you think about it's Evans versus Cortland Sutton versus Chris Godwin versus Jacoby Myers and a few other names, I felt like Mike Evans had the highest ceiling of the next 1 or 2 years of any player that I could pick on the board right now. So with that in mind of the Mike Evans selection, let's take a look at where my team is at through 9 rounds. It's Brock Purdy at quarterback, Devon Achane as the only running back. Then at the wide receiver spot, again, this is why it's the focus, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, Sam Laporta, Khalil Shakir, and Mike Evans with Dak Prescott in the Superflex. So we have filled out our starting lineup, except for that second running back spot at this moment. Again, 44 wide receivers have been selected by this time in this draft. I have 4 of them that if you look at 2025 ADP right now, 4 of them are selected in the top 29 for the 2025 overall season. So again, 4, that is CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, and Mike Evans. Top 29 wide receivers just for this year. And then the 5th is going around wide receiver 45 at this point, but that was a youth injection because I also think I can counteract that with even more aging wide receivers if I want more kind of spike weeks, higher performance type players for just a short-term view. Okay, rounds 10, 11, and 12. At the risk of it looking like I just filled out my starting lineup, it was mainly because the running back run was nuclear after the Mike Evans selection, okay? Isaiah Pacheco, James Conner, Tyrone Tracy, DeAndre Swift, Zach Charbonnet, Travis Etienne off the board. All of them. Again, I understand that the weakness of my team is going to be that second and third and fourth and fifth running back spots. So it's not going to feel like rainbows and roses all the time. But I still needed a starting running back in that second spot. And so I looked at the board. It's Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, Bashal Tutin, bunch of young guys. And if you want to go older, it's Aaron Jones, Ramondre Stevenson, Jalen Warren. So even if I really liked some other positional players, heck, even a third quarterback if I wanted to, I really felt like I needed to, and I hate having that feeling in these drafts, but needed to take my second running back for a complete starting lineup. And so I went with Tony Pollard. Look, I got last year by the Tennessee Titans. I thought it truly was going to be a 1A and 1B with Pollard and Tajay Spears, but Pollard looked excellent to open the season. Had some of his burst back, definitely had some of his tackle breaking back, and just the environment overall for the Titans this year, despite what Tony Pollard did last season, is going to be better. Like Hayden and I talk about it all the time on these videos. The right side of that offensive line just set certain series on flames in a bad way, on fire. They couldn't block anyone, especially in pass protection. It would tank any opportunities that they have. And so that's why they, and some might say overspent, but spent on Dan Moore from the Steelers to be their left tackle, moving J.C. Latham over to right tackle and bringing one of the most veteran guards in the league in Kevin Zeitler to fill that right guard spot. I mean, they might have plus starters across the board at every single one of those offensive line positions. And then just adding a quarterback in the backfield too is going to make series in, series out, and even red zone and scoring opportunities more highly available. So again, if Tony Pollard does lose some opportunities this year, the environment, the scoring should be better than it was in 2024, which brings us to round 11. This wasn't exactly the plan. And again, these are going to be the first bench spots I have. Didn't necessarily want to go and stack the Tennessee Titans offense. It's odd when I look at the roster that I have built that I have stacked players on good offenses. You can look at Devon Achane and Jalen Waddle. You can look at Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. You can look at Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, right? So at the very least, good players on good offenses. I had a chance to do that again here with either Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard or Juwan Jennings and Brock Purdy. Man, I love Juwan Jennings this year. Again, Hayden and I have talked about this constantly. He is their zone beater threat at this point, and that's exactly what Deebo Samuel had been in the past. Almost a spike week player with like 4 outstanding weeks this past season, and then 8 not so much. Granted, he didn't really play 90+% of snaps until about week 10 and on. Once he did, and he's going to again this year, he's going to be a stalwart of that offense, and I just think he's a heck of a player. Holding in at this point, I still would expect a deal to get done. The other name was Kyle Williams. That I really considered. And I'm sure many of you watching this have already said about 3 or 4 rounds ago, well, Josh is playing for the short term and not for the long term. Taking Calvin Ridley at 11-4 ahead of Kyle Williams at 11-5 was that final decision point for me because I think Kyle Williams is an excellent prospect. Stunned that he fell into the third round, 69th overall in the NFL draft. I think he can grow into, if not this year, other than Stephon Diggs, the Patriots' top pass catcher in an offense that I kind of feel is underrated at this point. He has vertical juice. He can win with the ball in his hands. But man, it's that pivot point, in these drafts when you get to, do I want someone like Calvin Ridley, who I actually think can be a top 25 scoring wide receiver this season? Do I want him, or do I plan for the future, kind of not punt 2025 a little bit, but it might take some growing pains and some growing time to even get into the starting lineup? Let's put it that way. Look, I think Kyle Williams can start in week 1, but we just do not know at this point. Meanwhile, Calvin Ridley is by far and away his team's number 1 pass catcher, and both of these clubs are projected for, nearly the same amount of points on offense. So, yeah, it hurt. I did go with Calvin Ridley here. Again, finished last season as like the wide receiver 41. We just did an episode with the Ringer Fantasy Football crew, and I thought Craig Horlbeck made an outstanding point that he's basically being drafted as if Will Levis is still his starting quarterback. That is clearly not the case. Will Levis is out for the season, and Calvin Ridley, I think, is legit good at football. Again, by far and away, the number 1 pass catcher on this team, has dealt with plenty, and I mean plenty, of off-target throws over the last couple of years, and he can still bring it. I understand he's wrong side of 30 at this point, but I am trying to win, as this pick really indicates, between Calvin Ridley and Kyle Williams in 2025 and 2026. So yeah, we went back-to-back Tennessee Titans, the running back in Tony Pollard, the wide receiver in Calvin Ridley. But that Juwan Jennings thought in the back of my head, I couldn't let it go. And you get these drafts and you're like, oh, he's going to be the next pick or the next pick after that. That wasn't the case, because right after Ridley, Kyle Williams went, then Keon Coleman, then Bashal Tutin, Tajay Spears. I mean, then a bunch of other wide receivers went, and Jack Besh and Deebo Samuel and Michael Pittman and Darnell Mooney. And I like those guys a lot. But I was like, I got to make a move. I got to make a move for him. And so what I did is I moved up in round 12 and then back in rounds 13 and 15. Because to me, Juwan Jennings is one of those names that is either a perfect bye week filler, can even start for me in week 1. Maybe Khalil Shakir isn't getting it done in terms of ceiling weeks, and Juwan Jennings goes on to be the best pass catcher of the 49ers outside of George Kittle. And I am continuing these stacks that I'm building in Dynasty, and I think he is going to get some type of a new contract. So yeah, round 13, Juwan Jennings. So yeah, round 12, Juwan Jennings. Welcome to the team. Okay, next 5 rounds. As you all know, once you get to this portion of the draft, can be hit or miss. You basically find your targets, and if you miss out on those, there's a whole bunch of players in between that you wouldn't even think about drafting, and you just move on to your next one, right? So if we look at the wide receiver position, I talked about it. A bunch of mid-aged wide receivers at this point. CeeDee Lamb is 26. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 25. Jalen Waddle, 26. And then I took those older statesmen. Let's put them. Juwan Jennings is 28. We know that Calvin Ridley at present is 30. Mike Evans will be 32 prior to the season. So if I was going to take any other wide receivers here, they really couldn't be above the age of 25. And in fact, I really wanted one prospect. And that one prospect turned out to be Adonai Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell's training camp has not been great. I still think A.D. Mitchell, just like Reggie Wayne, just like Michael Pittman, just like all of his teammates are talking about, is that the dude can flat out get open. So if he, does the other wide receiver stuff of staying on his feet, catching the football, not dropping them, I do believe a, top 36, heck, maybe even top 24 finish one day is in the range of outcomes for Adonai Mitchell. And I don't know if I can say that about unknowns like Alec Ayumanor, who was selected above him. Marvin Mims, a full round plus above him as really a role player. We'll see if he can be any more than that this year. Some names just after the wide receiver position with Adonai Mitchell, who's 22 years old, youth injection, Demario Douglas and Xavier Restrepo and Torrey Horton. So I'm cool with taking the risk of A.D. Mitchell. If I cut him in a few years for a draft pick, I cut him in a few years for a draft pick. And then the other wide receiver that I took in round 19 was Josh Palmer. Joe Puscaglia, one of the best beat writers in the game, especially for the Buffalo Bills, has said that Josh Palmer is just going to be a magnet for the first team. So I clicked Khalil Shakir's name before this, then I add like, how many rounds later? I mean, almost 10 rounds later. Yeah, 10 rounds later. I'm able to get Josh Palmer. Look, we saw in an MVP season that Josh Allen brought no one with him, but at the very least, if I am pressed for a starting wide receiver or a starting flex spot, then I'm being attached to a team that most likely has a chance of being a top 5 scoring team in that week. Josh Palmer just got a contract. He can play inside. He can play outside. And I would say consistency is not a name of the game when it comes to, Keon Coleman or Curtis Samuel or whoever else the Bills are trotting out there at wide receiver. So yeah, once again, a stack of Khalil Shakir and Josh Palmer. So again, weakest positions depth wise on the team has either been quarterback or tight end. The onesie-ish positions, even though obviously in Superflex and tight end premium, you can start them more often. And so this, I felt there were still tight end values on the board. Ahead of Adonai Mitchell, if Theo Johnson had fallen one pick, probably would have selected Theo Johnson. Think he could have a really nice 2025 season. He's round 18 in Underdog draft still right now, which is flabbergasting. He has that profile of a breakout in year 2 or especially year 3 because of the athleticism, even though he's coming off a significant injury. So yeah, Theo Johnson would have been the pick there. I took my third Tennessee Titan. Who thought this was possible? But, most likely took their leader in carries and targets. And I wouldn't be shocked if Chigo Okonkwo is second on the target list when it comes to the Tennessee Titans. So snagged him in round 17. And then when we circle back, round 19, Juwan Johnson, one pick after Josh Palmer. My challenge to all of you is to go look at Juwan Johnson's contract on Over the Cap. It is wild. The man, who's 29 years of age, has guaranteed money through the 2026 season. Now, you could also say, well, sure, every Saints contract is pretty amazing when you look at it. Sure, you could say that every single Saints contract is confusing when you look at it. That's how their salary cap works. Juwan Johnson, though, with some tight end injuries on the Saints at this point, we've seen how Kellen Moore had utilized tight ends in the past. He and Tyler Shuck were actually college teammates at one point. Juwan Johnson is one of the better late round tight end darts at this point. And so in tight end premium, he can be my third tight end on this list with a youthful Sam Laporta, a young-ish Chigo Okonkwo, and we had the old man in the room, and that is Juwan Johnson. Okay, now the interesting part here. After making the Josh Palmer and Juwan Johnson selections in round 19, the news drops that Joe Mixon is going to be basically sidelined until at least week 1 with this ankle foot injury that, a couple of weeks ago when he was put on the non-football injury list, Adam Schefter and I think other insiders, that it wouldn't take long. We will see him on the field at some point. That changed in about a week and a half. So I basically sold my soul to move up for Nick Chubb. I know. I talked about it, that I needed to get younger at the running back position. That's why I took the likes of Jarquez Hunter and Tank Bigsby. But when you just look at the other running backs that are still available here, it was Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who, sure, might do great things, but also, let's keep in mind, is a 7th round selection. And then, Rico Dowdle. And then, Rico Dowdle, Austin Eckler, Audric Estimate. I'm just going by ADP here on this platform. Isaiah Davis, Sean Tucker, Zach Moss. Nick Chubb did not play well in 2024, coming off a massive, significant injury. But just stacking him up with every other running back that is possibly available, of any running back still on the board, he has the best chance to touch the frickin' rock. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be a receiving threat. That would likely be Woody Marks, who was picked one spot before this one. Yep, I moved up from the 9th pick in the 20th round and basically sold off my 22nd pick and 24th pick to move back in 23 and 25 and also move back to 21 as well. So yeah, basically shoved all my chips in the rest of the way. I'm only going to be able to take who is still available on the board, but I just needed to chase these opportunities. Nick Caley coming in. I understand there's plenty of offensive line concerns for the Houston Texans. There should be. They have maybe 10 guys that they're just going to mix and mash and figure out what their best 5 is. But Nick Caley is going to come in and implement a gap running system, a system that we have seen Nick Chubb have plenty of success with in the past. I'm just hoping that one more year away from this second massive injury that Nick Chubb has sustained, if he can give us, 80% of what Nick Chubb used to be as a ball carrier and just hold on for a couple starts, Nick Chubb as a fantasy asset, to me, screams out when looking at everyone else on the board. And so I just had to make that move with how I am pursuing and how I have drafted that running back 2 position. I now have in that room Devon Achane, who, again, repeat, exceptional. And that running back 2 spot, it's Tony Pollard, or it's Jordan Mason, Jarquez Hunter, Tank Bigsby, and now Nick Chubb. And I'll probably add someone else in the final 5 picks that I do have. Okay, the other concern that came up during this draft is I do not have a third quarterback, and I don't know how I'm going to end up with a third quarterback. I got to that point where every single time I was on the board, I was like, it's only old guys left. And I'm sure someone will fall to me with one of these selections that I feel comfortable with. I was looking at Geno Smith. That didn't work because I moved up for Juwan Jennings. After that, I was looking at Tyler Shuck, for example. I just selected Jarquez Hunter ahead of him. And then my next pick was a few picks later, and that would have been Tank Bigsby. So yeah, I would have taken Tyler Shuck ahead of Tank Bigsby. Then Daniel Jones. I don't even know if he's going to start. And then we got to like the Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers area. Maybe I should have taken one of Aaron Rodgers or Russ ahead of Adonai Mitchell or Chigo Kwanko. The pick that I was really, 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 really hoping one would be at would be one of those 19th overall selections, 19th round picks, and they weren't. So I'm kind of out of luck here. Even like Dylan Gabriel is off the board. So my plan for quarterback 3 is we know quarterback injuries are going to happen. I either fill in the rest of my roster with 1 or 2 backup quarterbacks, or when one of those guys gets injured in the season, I just go all in with my fab, like all in. These are 25 player rosters that we have. There's not going to be that many free agents that I think will impact my roster at this point. And so just unload my budget on fill in starting quarterbacks and go from there. I also think that quarterbacks, even in Superflex leagues, are undervalued when we come to rookie drafts. Bo Nix and Michael Penix early on in Dynasty rookie drafts, even in Superflex, were like round 1-2 turn type players. It's one of those things where the draft community gets groupthink on certain prospects they do not like, think are overvalued and got overdrafted in the actual NFL draft, and that impacts their Dynasty rankings. And so, look, I'm just going to act on that in the future, and along with taking running backs there, because my wide receiver room, I think, is pretty fantastic. Just over 3 weeks, 22 days, the draft is done. A couple more picks to go. A.J. Barner, Joe Flacco, Malik Washington, Jane Watkins, the rookie wide receiver for the 49ers. There's really no one left on the board. But I thought like the way to end this is to just go through each of these teams just to see what their strategies are very, very quickly and very, very briefly. We'll not use their real names, just we'll use their names here on this platform. So we'll start with the 101 slot, Max's Dag. As you can see, some early wide receivers, young, good, Jamar Chase, Ladd McConkey. And then the interesting part about this 101 slot is punting quarterback in a way in Superflex. So 4 wide receivers and 4 running backs ahead of double quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa and Sam Darnold, and double tight end as well in a tight end premium league. Ito's up next in the 2 slot. When you're in that 102 spot, you don't know exactly how, the rest of the first round and even most of the second round is going to go. So it makes sense to open with a quarterback in Josh Allen. Took another one in Bo Nix because I'm, again, sure he was fearful that with the third round reversal, he has to wait a very, very, very long time. We'll still able to get Bucky Irving. Again, very balanced build, and not just from a positional standpoint, but also from young players like Emeka Egbuka and Jaden Higgins versus old players like Chris Godwin or Deebo Samuel. Max Nate, Lamar Jackson, Nico Collins, A.J. Brown, Kyler Murray, and then Tyler Warren, Derrick Henry. So again, we're getting this mix of new and old: Tyreek Hill, Mark Andrews, Cortland Sutton, James Conner. So in fact, I would lean this one towards being more of a competitor than anything else. Just like me, Max seems to want to win in 2025 with a lot of these, let's say,
6 through 10 round shots. I mean, that's where you got Derrick Henry, Tyreek, Mark Andrews, Cortland Sutton, James Conner. I like it a lot. Plus some late rounders who I really enjoy. Jalen Wright. Then the 104. It's producer Weaves. I know Weaves very well. I know Weaves wants to mix in a number, and I mean a number of young players. And I always thought that the 104 is like the ideal position in one of these drafts because you know you're going to get at least one of the 3 quarterbacks in Josh Allen, Lamar, and Jane Daniels. Or if they're off the board, then you can just get Jamar Chase. Simple stuff. So we get Jaden, Drake London, JSN, and Jordan Love in the opening 4. And then, yes, here come the young players, 2 young running backs, Trevion Henderson, Caleb Johnson, Chris Olave, Josh Downs. And yes, even mixing in some vets, Devontae Adams, Travis Etienne. And then what I really liked is after he missed out on tight ends early on, he really hammered that position later with Evan Ingram, Mason Taylor, Harold Fannin. So Evan Ingram around the age 30 mark could have a great 2025, but he's hoping for at least one of Mason Taylor, Harold Fannin to claim their job for the long term and be quite good in their position. Ian H next. Interesting start here, as we talked about the front. Brock Bowers, Trey McBride. Tight end premium. Not huge, just a half point. But I can't wait to see how this unfolds because as much as I love George Kittle, Brock Bowers and Trey McBride, both young, both fantastic, and both the top 2 tight ends just for the 2025 season. Then after that, CJ Stroud, and then adds in more flavor, more zest in Travis Hunter. And one of my favorite wide receivers that I think the Dynasty community is underrating in Rome Odunze. And then just a bunch of running backs here. Quinshawn, before we knew all the details, I want to point out Joe Mixon, Tyrone Tracy, Tajay Spears. Can't wait to track that team. Destroyek, Jalen Hurts, Caleb Williams, and then Amarian Hampton, Tedero McMillan, Zay Flowers, George Pickens, Matthew Golden. A heavy emphasis in youth on this team. Dalton Kincaid, Jackson Dart, Bachel Tootin, Elijah Arroyo, Britton Strange, right? Brashard Smith as we go along. Even Jalen Lane in round 22. So much youth on Destroyek. He's playing the long game, even with 4 quarterbacks, and really 3 involved because we know 2 of them really make up the New York Giants. G. Waller, again, double quarterback start. Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, a run on wide receivers. He was like me, where we kind of punted running back a bit later on, or at least that was the plan. He will be fighting for that second running back spot, just like I will be, because that goes Dave Montgomery and then Zach Charbonnet, Rashad White, Jonathan Brooks, Damian Martinez. It'd be a huge win somehow for G. Waller if Jonathan Brooks could come back in 2026 and claim some type of, at least NFL career, but make good on who I thought he was as a really, really good prospect in the NFL. These wide receivers are a lot of fun. Garrett Wilson, Rashee Rice, Devontae Smith, Jameson Williams, Jerry Jeudy, so on and so forth. Kay Ambrose, fun team. Justin Jefferson, Saquon Barkley, Marvin Harrison Jr. And then Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff in 2 or 3 rounds, Josh Jacobs, RJ Harvey, Cam Scadavoo. So that is 4 wide receiver picks in the opening 8. So that is 4 running back picks in the opening 8 overall selections. And then a bunch of young wide receivers after that. Trey Harris, Kyle Williams, Cedric Tillman, Isaac Tesla. Then we go to AW. Malik Neighbors, Puka Nacua to start. 2 phenom wide receivers. Trevor Lawrence hoping for that jump. One of, hopefully, Justin Fields and Anthony Richardson to make good on their promise, their potential. I think it could be AR's year. We'll see. 2 of my favorite running backs, Ken Walker, Chase Brown. And then as he mixes in, the DK Metcalfs, the Brian Robinsons, the Jacoby Myers, Rashid Shaheeds. There's a run on running backs here from 12 through 16. Fascinating. Ramondre, Ray Davis, Algier, Devin Neal, Roshan Johnson. So while Ramondre might be on a different team in 26 or 27, he has a bunch of other young running backs as well as Ray Davis, Devin Neal, Roshan, and then Tyler Algier. Be interesting to track if he gets maybe a starting contract for the 2026 season somewhere else. Okay, 2 more. Dagas Max, Bijan, Ashton Genty. It's so interesting to me that, I went into this saying early wide receivers, and I want to find that as the foundation of my team. This, with Dagas Max, when you're sitting at the turn, and you can get 2 maybe foundation running backs, albeit maybe the longevity of their careers are quite different than that of wide receivers. It can be up and down because of injuries. At the same time, these two are just total freaks. And we have seen total freaks like Saquon, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara. I can go on and on down the list. Sure, they might be injured some portions of a season or not at all. And then the longevity of their careers just trumps whatever else we expect at the running back position. He's hoping for that with these two running backs for sure. And then your young quarterbacks, Drake May, Cam Ward, Michael Penix, young tight ends, Colson Loveland, Kyle Pitts. Wide receiver is going to be the area here for Daggas Max because it's Xavier Worthy, Luther Burden, Ricky Pearsall, Jalen McMillan, Xavier Leggett. Just looking at that, two wide receivers I would feel really good about their playing time in 2025 in Xavier Worthy and Ricky Pearsall. But hey, maybe it's the long game because, you know, he might even toss in like Adam Thielen, who was a 23rd round pick as one of his starters, Xavier Leggett, until Jalen McMillan or Luther Burden really nailed down one of those starting wide receiver spots. All right, let's close it out with Robbie, Jahmyr Gibbs, Brian Thomas, Justin Herbert, Breece Hall, J.J. McCarthy, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, and then fun two tight ends in Tucker Kraft and David Njoku. Nothing totally stands out here, but some interesting quarterback punts in Jalen Milroe and Tyler Shuck. I was a big fan of Jalen Milroe during the draft process. If he even gets starts in 2026, that could break fantasy football in certain ways. I mean, we haven't really seen as explosive of a rusher at the quarterback position with him in a very, very, very long time. And also Tyler Shuck. So for me, looking at my team, I really only have two quarterbacks. He potentially has 4 starters in the NFL. Very cool. All right. That does it. Once again, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully this was enjoyable. Hopefully I didn't repeat myself 1,000 times, just 900 times. Shout out to all of you for watching. Appreciate it very, very, very much. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a thumbs up. We've got tons of preseason reaction and informative content for you to help you win not just your dynasty leagues, but even more importantly, your home redraft leagues as well. Up the Villa. Talk to y'all soon. See ya. Are we rolling?
I heard you. Yeah. Yeah, we're
Cool.
recorded.
Okay.
Do you want me to mute? Like not hear any of this?
Yes.
Okay. I'll do.
I do.